From the open season property studio, welcome to Super Talk Outdoor, where every single Monday at lunchtime we celebrate the world-class outdoors of the state of Mississippi, because this is the capital of the outdoors in America. I want to thank you for joining us on the powerful Super Talk Mississippi radio network. You can listen to Super Talk Outdoors at supertalk.fm, Amazon Alexa, the Super Talk Mississippi app, or at Super Talk TV at C Spire TV. But some of you are watching the show on YouTube or Facebook, or listening on your favorite podcast, and we appreciate that. It's August the 19th, 2024. Listen, I hope you are having a great day. You know, it's my hope that Super Talk Outdoors reminds us weekly of how lucky we are to live in Mississippi. You know, we tend to take that for granted. It's true, isn't it? That's just a fact of life. But we tend not to fully appreciate things and places that are closest to us. And this show is about reminding you of that. And it's good to be reminded, I think. Certainly based on the feedback I hear, it's good to be reminded. So even if you live here, there's so much to see and experience in Mississippi's diverse outdoors. And from one season to the next, and I look forward to this, in fact, it can be so different and equally as inspiring as the last time, if not more so. I mean, the changes that exist in deer movement and duck patterns and the land, it's awesome to see that on a year-to-year basis and take it in and measure it and understand it. And then what at times are sort of the complicated things in life, like social and material aspects of our lives. You know, those things can be wiped away when we enter the outdoors and take into, for example, something like the vastness of the Mississippi Delta. Man, is that incredible. That place is incredible. Or when you fish at a place like Grenada Lake, or if you go to Horn Island off of coastal Mississippi, you know, every time I go there, I am spellbound as the osprey are flying, and it's just complete solitude. Of course, there might be an alligator or two from time to time, and you got to contend with that. But man, you're talking about special. There are so many other unique and interesting places across Mississippi. And if you just sit still in any of those places, you can literally feel the cleansing of your soul. That's why we want to go back. It's like going to church, isn't it? And if you feel like it, if you feel like I do, you're never going to leave here. Mississippi is not only home, but it's the capital of the outdoors. There's no better place than here. And speaking of the capital of the outdoors, we're going to focus today on one of the most popular pastimes in the Mississippi hunting community, whitetail deer hunting. And I'm joined today by my friend William McKinley, who's head of the deer program for the Department of Wildlife, Fisheries, and Parks here in Mississippi. And he's really become a good friend, somebody I have tremendous respect for. William, how you doing, my friend?
I'm doing well, Ricky. Doing well.
So, you know, we do tend to take it for granted, don't you? I mean, what we have in our own backyard, just across the state of Mississippi, is truly special, isn't it?
Ricky, I've got 20 acres that I'm blessed to have had. I'm able to hunt on 20 acres and in my backyard and be able to take a deer. I mean, this past season, how great is that? With one of the highest deer herds anywhere in the country, harvesting more older age class bucks than any other state, or at least nearly any other state. So many of our deer are 4-year-old and older. We've got a really great resource here. So important to our hunters and to Mississippi families.
Listen, while you and I have visited countless times on this show, let's assume that someone is new listening to the show, so they haven't heard our previous discussions. Let's give them a feel for, you know, a little bit about your background, but also about the deer program and what you hope to accomplish. And we'll get into some of the details here in just a second, but just kind of the high level elevator speech that you would give to people.
So a lot of times I get asked, what do we do? And we're gathering data. I mean, the deer program is all about data, whether it's through our DMAP program, whether it's through observations. There's so much data to be had out there, whether it's the disease surveillance. And then we're analyzing that data. And once we look at those results, we make recommendations, and we make recommendations based on science. So my goal is a healthy deer herd across this state that my grandkids that I hope to have one day and beyond will be able to enjoy.
That's my goal too, man. That's definitely my goal. There's nothing better than to be in the woods with my grandkids, and I want them to be able to experience what I've experienced. This past year, having the opportunity to shoot a 160 plus inch whitetail deer that we had history with, that you and I have discussed before in the past. But I want them to have that opportunity. I want them to feel that. But more than anything, man, it's just about being there, being there, teaching them about responsibility and hunter ethics, and, teaching them at a young age to take a deep breath and have that feeling of the soul cleansing. They may not really fully understand what's happening, but it's happening. And the opportunity to really share that with them, gosh, man, it's so important. Deer hunting in Mississippi is really important, isn't it? I mean, I'm not talking about just from a social and cultural point of view, but also from an economic point of view.
Oh, absolutely, Ricky. It brings in, the estimates from a few years back from U.S. Fish and Wildlife is it was close to a $1 billion economic boost to our state. I mean, it's huge. People are spending money to lease land, to plant food plots, on guns and ammunition, and just think of how many people in the state like you travel to go hunt it within the state, but you come from the coast and you go to the Mississippi Delta. You buy food there. You buy food in a county. You go to a restaurant. You're bringing in an in-state tourism level that many, many hunters across this state they're driving places, they're hunting, they're spending so much money, and it's such an important boom, not to mention the millions upon millions of pounds of venison that are being harvested and used by Mississippi families across the state. So,
yeah, no doubt about it, man. I just think about the economic impact me and my family and my closest friends have every year, and it's significant. I mean, the budget is tens of thousands of dollars, and I know that it's important to that area. And whether it's my buddy who provides our seeds, Spike Crawford, or whether it's going to BB's in Greenwood to get our meat processed, or whether it's going to the top of the hill right there in the Mississippi Delta and having a great hamburger. It happens in so many different ways. But yeah, you're right. I mean, the economic impact is great. My son often tells me, he says, this is my son Jordan. Both of my sons hunt with me, but one lives in New York and doesn't have the opportunity to hunt as much. But my son Jordan is just really focused on. He just is obsessed with the outdoors. But he says, "Gosh, man, I wish the drive was shorter because it takes us, a little bit more than 4 hours to get to the main camp." Now we have another place in the Chula area, and just set up some housing opportunity there. So that's going to, at least if you're coming in late, you're going to duck hunt the next morning. You got a chance to do that. But what I say to him is, I said, look, we could be 2 hours or 3 hours away, but it won't be as good. It won't be as good. And that's true. There's something special about the Mississippi Delta, isn't it?
It is. That flat ground. It's something, some of the most fertile soil in the entire Southeast, and the deer show that fertility. They do in antler and body weight.
So you kind of hit on this a little bit, but you're into Delta, you're into data, but I mean, you're providing a lot of advice to people about habitat and population monitoring, and of course hunting regulations as it relates to all that. But as a former CEO, having been in the media industry all my career, I often said what gets measured gets done, but data is super important today. I mean, in so many, whether it's managing the herd, trying to get bigger deer or whatever. We'll come back and talk about diseases, and especially CWD, and how important data is to that conversation. But when you collect data, it gives you the ability to compare notes with other states, and lots of opportunities come out of that, don't they, William?
They do, and we're doing that on a very regular basis. the deer coordinators in our surrounding states, we're on a first name basis. I mean, we're talking about issues. We're talking about issues near the state line and away from the state line, and we're sharing data on what works and what's not working.
Yeah. Hey, listen. So let's talk some specifics about the deer season. But 25 days away. It's amazing, and a lot of work has to happen in the next 25 days. But let's tell a little bit. We have a long season. You can talk about how long it is, and a little bit more about harvesting goals, et cetera. But we have a population problem in Mississippi. We'll get there as we sort of evolve this part of the conversation. We've got to get the deer population down for a number of reasons. In fact, we're at the end of this segment, so why don't we do this? When we get back on the other side, we'll pick it up right there, talk about the upcoming deer season, and we'll urge people to help us manage the population. When we get on the other side with William McKinley, we'll continue the conversation. Welcome back to SuperTalk Outdoors from the Open Season Properties Studio. Listen, Open Season Properties is a full-service real estate company with a team approach philosophy that ensures your needs are of the highest priority, whether it's rural land sales, residential, or commercial properties. Open Season Properties markets and sells real estate not just in Mississippi, but in Louisiana, Arkansas, Tennessee, Alabama, and Georgia. And they're dedicated to the development of long-term client relationships and unwavering commitment to service. Go to openseasonproperties.com to learn more. And we're thrilled to have Open Season Properties as the title sponsor for SuperTalk Outdoors. Hey, we have William McKinley with us today. He's head of the deer program for the Mississippi Department of Wildlife, Fisheries, and Parks. I can't focus enough on the Mississippi Department of Wildlife, Fisheries, and Parks because the work that they do to help us maintain sort of the status that I refer to it as the capital of outdoors in America. It takes a lot of dedicated people to accomplish that. And William McKinley is one of them. He's not just known as an expert, and he's sort of coveted in Mississippi, but he's known as an expert around the world, around the United States, and we're thrilled about that. But anyway, season's 25 days away. Why don't you give us some details of what to look forward to, William?
Ricky, we've got a good season upcoming. Though summer it's hot, but it's not nearly as dry as last year. We're not looking at the drought we had last year. Now, saying that, it is pretty dry out there. But, Ricky, let's look at deer season big picture as a whole. Mississippi offers 141 days of deer hunting. That's 39% of the year. You're never very far away from deer season in Mississippi. So we literally hunt them from before their antlers shed their velvet to after the antlers are falling off in this state. So, of course, it never fails. Somebody's going to call in late February and ask for the season to be extended again, but we hear that every year. But we have a big deer population in the state. Our numbers came in. We don't have mandatory harvest reporting, so we have to wait and conduct a survey after all hunting seasons close for the year. And we get an estimate of how many deer and other game, turkey, waterfowl, etc., were harvested last season. The number for last season was 279,000 deer by licensed hunters. So that doesn't count because all the hunters that are under 16, over 65, we can safely assume well over 300,000 deer getting harvested in the state. And I know I've already done it one time today. I take it back to the venison of how important that is for families, but you're talking about well over 10 million pounds of venison out there. And we only got 3 million people in the state, Ricky. So think of how important a food resource that is. But deer are abundant. They're, we believe, more abundant than they've ever been in the history of our state. We think we are at a record, or at least near record, high deer population.
Well, what that means is that the deer population, in spite of the big numbers of harvest, it sounds like a big number. And it's a big number, if you relatively speak, if you compare it to, say, some other states. But the reality is the population of deer continues to grow. And when you look at that on sort of on a average per hunter basis over the years, the data actually gives you some alarming results, doesn't it?
It does, Ricky. If we go back to the early 2000s when we had fewer deer, hunters were actually harvesting more deer per successful hunter. And now I will say our hunter numbers have held very consistent to slightly increased over those years. That's a good thing. That's bucking the trend of other states across the country. But hunters are choosing to shoot slightly less deer. And when asked why, the answer I usually get is, well, what am I going to do with it? I need one or I need two deer a year. And so that's thrown out there as the reason for not harvesting more. And hey, I get that. Um, Processing, there's a cost there, either in time or in money in processing an animal. There's freezer room. There's no hunter out there wants to shoot a deer and not have something to do with it. We fully realize that. That's why programs like Hunters Harvest for the donation program is so important. And we're in talks with MSU Extension right now on a pilot project, kind of a deer share program where local hunters could find out who are local people who would accept a deer, non-hunters, or people who just weren't able to get a deer that year. So trying to figure out how to put that together that you could look and go, hey, I could harvest another doe. I know I need to on this property, and I could meet somebody and give it away to someone who really wants it and will take it. And we're hoping to kick off that program this year, still in its development stages though.
Hey, William, one of the things on one of the properties that I hunt on, we decided last year to get more aggressive. We needed to get more aggressive with taking does. And the farmer, and we'll come back to what farmers are experiencing across the state, but the farmer on this particular piece of property they were getting decimated with, the crops. It was a very, very serious problem. But what happens when you decide, and you alluded to it here just a second ago, but when you decide that you're going to take more does, no one wants to take a doe that's not going to be utilized. Okay, ethically,
right,
we're just not going to do that. But what I've learned is that you may not be leasing from a farmer, but if you know a farmer near you, usually you can talk to the farmer and he'll know somebody who needs the deer meat. And so that's what we do. We've created these networks, calls that we can make. And frankly, you know what we do, William? We make the calls before we go hunting. We actually know, what we'll know who's going to take it and exactly what we're going to do when we get done. So we'll say, let's say Earl on Travis's farm says, yeah, I would love for you to get me a doe. And I say, okay, look, here's what we're going to do. We're likely going to get one, and we'll meet you back here, and I'll give you a call, and it'll be about this time. And so all that's prearranged. And then he knows people. You see what I'm saying? So it creates these networks, and it makes it so much easier. I would say, do that before you go hunting. Start to develop these networks, and people know other people, and they know other. Before you know it, you got a bunch of different phone numbers. And what I end up needing to do usually is making one phone call, and then they'll send a text to a group of people, and they'll let us know. But that's the key. But if we've got to get better. I mean, we'll come to CWD in a minute. There's a clarion call to reduce population related to CWD, but it's not just that. It's if you talk to farmers, the damage that they're dealing with today. One of the farmers, the farmer adjacent to the property that I lease in Tallahatchie County, a huge piece of property last year that he planted soybeans in, the entire thing was decimated. I mean, it was incredible. I mean, it wasn't, it's interesting too, William, it wasn't the deer that was on this property. It was deer coming in to this property from God knows where. I mean, just huge population showing up, once the planting started. But talk a little bit more about the farmers and what cities are experiencing, what rural gardeners are experiencing, and then really importantly, what the highways are experiencing.
So back on the farmers, Ricky, you hit a really good point that quite often, most of the time, when farms are getting damaged, it would certainly be the local deer that live there, but agriculture attracts deer. They come from many cases miles. We've shown that with radio collar and GPS collared studies that their home range in the summer might be quite different than it is in the fall and winter. So they come into the ag field, they're causing a lot of damage. And so just harvesting more deer on that property quite often is not the answer. And as I want to preface one thing though, because some people out there are going to hear this and go, well, I don't have that many deer on my property, and know that they may not. So we're not talking about statewide every property. I'm talking about the state as a whole needs to increase, and that needs to be site specific on properties, which are a lot of them that have too many deer. But just so that I can make that clarification there, we're not talking about every piece of ground. Population varies quite a bit across this state, but we get a lot of complaints. We are issuing animal control permits. They are controversial, certainly. It pits us between commerce and conservation, and that's not a good place to be, but they are also a necessary evil in my mind in many of these cases, because as you said, large fields getting wiped out. We're getting more and more, switching gears a minute, more and more complaints from urban deer now, not from the deer themselves, from people living in suburbs and towns. With many cities out there, there's even some cities in the state that don't allow archery hunting. And I mean, archery hunting's allowed in Washington, D.C. To control the deer population. Cornell did in New York did a wonderful study showing that's the best means of controlling an urban deer population.
Yeah, we got to get aligned around it. That's for sure. So it's a really, really important challenge. And if we get aligned and educated, we can manage it. Hey, when we come back, we'll continue our conversation with William McKinley. Welcome back to Super Talk Outdoors. I hope you're having a great day. And listen, I really appreciate you joining us on this show. Listen, are you looking to purchase the perfect piece of hunting property, upgrade your farm equipment, or have you been dreaming of owning your slice of heaven out in the country? Look no further than Mississippi Land Bank for your financing needs. For over 100 years, farming families and landowners in North Mississippi have turned to Mississippi Land Bank for all kinds of financial solutions, whether it's for land, equipment, or livestock. For more information, visit mslandbank.com or go by and see one of their friendly staff at any of their offices. So listen, we're having a conversation with William McKinley, who's head of the deer program at the Department of Wildlife, Fisheries, and Parks. And we're really dedicating the show today to whitetail deer. Hey, when we went to break, though, we were sharing that there are a lot of unfortunate side effects of not managing the deer herd, to farmers, to cities, to rural gardens. But actually, State Farm has some data that they shared. And Mississippi didn't match up real well when we talked about the number of animal-involved claims that they have, did it?
Well, Ricky, we get that data annually, and this is from year before last. We typically receive it about October for the previous year. Mississippi ranks number 7 in deer vehicle collisions nationwide, and according to their 1 in 63 motorists filed a claim for hitting an animal, primarily deer, that year. So, and I'm going to go out on a limb and say there's probably some folks hit a deer and didn't file a claim, Ricky. So probably a lot of them out there where the deer didn't do much damage. But bottom line, there's a lot of deer vehicle collisions happening out there in the state. And just one more example that our herd is increasing, and a little too much of a good thing. Deer are a wonderful resource, but a lot of deer do bring some problems with them.
So listen, one of the things you guys do is the DMAP program, and it continues to do really well. To some extent, if I'm reading this correctly, it's been a little bit simplified based on what was done in the past. But why don't you kind of give us an idea of what the level 2 DMAP program is all about?
Sure. I'll start with level 1, the original DMAP, pulling jawbones, weighing deer, turning that data in, get a very specific report to the property. We began a level 2 DMAP a couple of years ago with no acreage requirement, no jawbone, no body weight requirement. The only requirement from those hunters on that ground is to turn in how many deer they harvested off of that property and we will offer antlerless tags. And by the way, if a property is enrolled in DMAP, they are able to use a modern rifle during the early primitive weapon season. So that's another carrot out there that they can start the Monday after youth weekend. They can start using a modern rifle, a 270, a 30-06 right then, and to harvest does only for 12 days. And I highly encourage that. It's a very productive time to be in the woods shooting does. So that program's out there for anyone who wants to sign up, and they just need to log on to our website and request a site visit.
That is awesome, man. That's, I've heard this from many people. They want to do the program, but they don't know how to pull the jawbones. That's kind of complicated. They don't have the ability to weigh the deer. You know what I'm saying? It's an issue. So I think it's great that y'all responded to that feedback by developing this level 2 opportunity. And I think that's awesome. In fact, I'm going to get my properties involved in the DMAT level 2 program myself. So listen, it's good stuff. Anything else you want to say about DMAT before we shift gears?
Let's shift to those 3 ugly letters that we said we were going to talk about today.
CWD. Listen, we had a great show, and I really want to encourage people, if they missed that show, you can go to the SuperTalk Outdoors Facebook page. You can go to YouTube. But it was a terrific conversation between William and Bronson Strickland, who is at the Deer Lab at Mississippi State, and we talked about a lot of the myths associated with it. And I mean, the feedback on that show was really, really good. It's the kind of it will stand the test of time, because much of what we talked about in there was sort of overcoming the myths. But there's still a lot of misinformation out there. I'll give you I just this morning on a CWD, the Chronic Wasting Disease Alliance website, somebody commented, how do people refute government findings? Money wouldn't matter. Civilian sources carry no valid input. We're at a disadvantage from activists who want to will stop nothing to end hunting, including planting infected carcasses from eastern high-density deer farms. Whew, that's a mouthful. But look, without trying to focus specifically on this comment, it just shows they don't get it. They don't understand it. One of the things that's really happening right now in the United States is tremendous sharing of data across the states. So first of all, chronic wasting disease is real. And if it were something that suddenly happened and you could go put your finger on it and deal with it, it would be a lot easier to deal with. But it's just long process of getting infected, and it allows a lot of misinformation to kind of seep in as you try to educate people. But the data collection and what you're being involved in terms of national meetings, man, that's really helping kind of bring validity to the problem, isn't it?
It is, Ricky. So just in July, we at MDWFP attended 2 different meetings. One, we hosted the annual Cervid working group. That's the deer folks from the Southeast, from Delaware to Texas. And we hosted it up at J.P. Coleman State Park, had a wonderful setting, wonderful venue for it there. And about half of that meeting is devoted to CWD. And we talk about different methods, different studies ongoing. A couple of weeks following that, Tennessee Wildlife and Arkansas Game and Fish, they went together and co-hosted a CWD research consortium for 9 states up in Memphis. We held it at the Ducks Unlimited headquarters there on the east side of Memphis. A several-day meeting, and one difference in that meeting is it pulled together not just the deer people, but the CWD coordinators, the wildlife health coordinators, and administration, chiefs and assistant chiefs of wildlife, put them all in the same room this was Illinois, Missouri, North Carolina down, to look at these outbreaks that we are sharing of CWD outbreaks. There are numerous scattered outbreaks that in some cases appear to be growing together, but to talk about methods that have been working. For one neat piece of info, not neat, that's the wrong word, one piece of information. you're 5 times more likely to kill a positive deer if you're within 1 mile of a positive deer. Now that seems obvious, and it is kind of obvious because deer give it to another, but the biggest way to control this disease is to remove a positive deer from the landscape. So that's why we, for a few years now, have been offering DMAP 3-mile tags, CWD 3-mile tags. If you mentioned your land is in Tallahatchie County is not very far from where a positive was harvested years ago. Properties within 3 miles are eligible to sign up for these tags. They're property specific. And we allow hunters within 3 miles, and remember, you got to have the tag in hand, but it allows them to use a gun during archery season. So we want more deer harvested. Some states tackle this through sharpshooting. We are choosing to use the hunters in Mississippi and allow them to harvest more deer right where CWD is, more like surgical strikes. Go in and remove it right where it is. Get them to harvest more deer. So if anyone's eligible and interested in those tags, they're either sex tags, and they would allow you to use a gun during an archery season in Mississippi. Just go to our website and see if they apply and see if they're eligible.
So, William, in that first meeting, you had 16 states in attendance, and in the second meeting, 9 states: Alabama, Arkansas, Illinois, Kentucky, Louisiana, Mississippi, Missouri, North Carolina, and Tennessee. When you get together, the fact that you've created a national database and there's some commonality, you got to compare apples to apples. That's hugely important. And so taking sort of a data management approach to understanding the disease has really made a difference in trying to understand the scale of the problem, hasn't it?
It has, Ricky, and being able to pull that data together, but also recognize our political differences. So Missouri, a 9-day gun season, but we allow guns from November through mid-February. So a mandatory sampling in Missouri gets a really high volume of samples. You only got 9 days to shoot them with a gun. A mandatory sampling in a deeper South state would not result in near as many samples because our hunting is much more spread out. You and I are both guilty of going, the weather's just not great today. I think I'll wait till tomorrow. So it's helped us on a big picture look at techniques that are working and address those myths out there as well, because they deal with them as well as we do.
I think every state does, that's for sure. But boy, when you can compare data and begin to understand where the best practices are and what Mississippi might be able to do to affect the prevalence, it's important. When we come back, we'll continue this part of the conversation in the final segment with my friend William McKinley, head of the deer program for the Department of Wildlife, Fisheries, and Parks. We'll see you after this. Welcome back to SuperTalk Outdoors. Again, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate that. And we're coming to you from the Open Season Property Studio. And speaking of that, in a world where honesty and dependability are rare, Austin Seals and Jordan Blissett at Open Season Property stand out with their commitment to integrity and hard work. With a background in agriculture science, marketing, and hunting land development, this team offers a real service that you can rely on when buying or selling real estate. So whether your family property or your first piece of ground, they understand the significance of every single transaction, specializing in recreational land, poultry, farms, investment properties, farm and timberlands, and more. They are here to meet all your real estate needs. I think, gosh, man, they're really good at what they do. So give Austin Seals and Jordan Blissett at Open Season Properties a call today and experience the difference. We're visiting with William McKinley, who's head of the deer program for the Mississippi Department of Wildlife, Fisheries, and Parks. We ended the discussion in the last segment talking about the importance of data collection and all that. What's important? I started studying CWD a couple of years ago, and I'm where I need to be as it relates to it. I'm learning more every day. You can never learn all that's going on across the United States, but Mississippi is in a great position today to understand what it is we need to do to make a difference. And what I've learned is that the main goal is to slow down the spread We need to slow down the spread to give science a chance to catch up. That's the way I say it. That's the way you should say it. We need to slow down the spread of CWD to give science a chance to catch up, because there's no cure. And if we don't address it using the best practices we're learning about, we're going to actually facilitate the spread of CWD. And every county in Mississippi will have the opportunity to be like Benton County. And Benton County, you don't want to be Benton County. I had the opportunity to visit with Terry Abbey recently, and the stories that he tells about the prevalence of CWD on his land, it brings tears to your eyes. So anyway, we pick it up from there.
So, Ricky, pooling all this data from other states together has shown us that CWD is a timeline. You're either on a property or large scale area, you're either at zero, which is where you want to be, or you're in those many years where it's increasing very slowly and it's just kind of festering on the landscape, or you're in that point of exponential increase. Benton County's in that exponential increase. We've seen it go from 5.5% to 20%. That's 1 in 18 deer to 1 in 5 deer just in the past 6 years. Now, what we've seen is that some of these states like West Virginia, they found it in 2005. They're now at 60% prevalence in their endemic area. They've got a large-scale GPS study ongoing of collared animals with mortality sensors. CWD is killing more deer than hunters are in that endemic area now. That's scary. That's where that timeline is going to. So all the more reason to keep it down in that lower prevalence. Arkansas has a similar study ongoing in their endemic area of northwestern Arkansas. And they are finding that in that area, their prevalence is a little behind, about 30%. Not the 60 West Virginia is. CWD is killing as many deer as hunters are there. Well, Ricky, it doesn't take a lot of thought to think if something's got to give. And when a population is having that many deer removed from it, if suddenly, we've been talking about needing to harvest more deer. That is not how I want Mississippi to take more deer. Period. I want it to be hunters taking those deer and helping get control of this situation. Keep this prevalence down low. Find CWD early. Get your deer tested, because this disease is real, and its biggest aspect that makes it so hard to manage is it's slow.
I call it insidious. It's insidious.
It seems to be, at this point, the science suggests we can't turn that tide whenever we get to that endemic area. I hope that we find something someday that will, but right now we know that aggressive measures right where the deer is, getting hunters to take more deer right where they find a positive, that actually can lower prevalence and keep prevalence down. So that's the route we're taking. But CWD is a big issue across our entire continent now. Canada's battling 35 states. Washington State just found it last week and announced it's a big issue, and many states are fighting it, and we're now sharing that data, which makes a better fight.
It's great to have the deer lab at Mississippi State. I mean, I can't tell you how important that is. Drew St. John has invested in the deer lab, and Bronson Strickland. But the work that they're doing, especially in places like Benton County, is incredibly important, isn't it?
It is, from research studies like the feeder study that they conducted there to the environmental studies where we're testing scrapes. And, I hope that we'll soon be able to get a lab at MSU to help to do that, maybe one day in the future. But
I hope so too. I think because we have one big testing facility in the nation, and we need more. And Mississippi State, through the Deer Lab, can play an important role. This has been William McKinley from the Department of Wildlife, Fisheries, and Parks. Certainly not the last time we're going to talk about this. One important discussion we'll have in the near future is about the role that supplemental feeding plays in all of this, and we need to tackle that one. That's for sure. Listen, have a great day. Stay safe in the outdoors, and we'll see you next Monday.